can always remember her with a twinkle in her eye. She always had a wee bit of devilment about her.
I wouldn't say she was a formidable woman because she was so gentle.
One lady single-handedly went around and did the first comprehensive research in the whole of Inishowen.
Mabel knew every blade of grass and every stone on the Inishowen Peninsula. Archaeologists love to study the people who've done archaeology in the past, and many of them were eccentric characters with kind of fascinating histories. And Mabel certainly is one of those people. Not that she was eccentric, although she was a little bit, but that she was so able and so remarkable.
So she was a teacher full-time, and it was on the weekends and the summertime that she would actually go out to survey archaeological monuments like where we're at here in Colhoun. So we're actually standing at the remains of a 17th century gable. And this is one of many different sites that Mabel would have surveyed at the time. There's some fabulous stories about how Mabel used to travel from her home in Deanfield, which is located on the waterside in Derry City, out to sites in Malin Head, for example, which would have been 32 miles on a bicycle.
She spent her whole life protecting and preserving and recording all the heritage of Inishowen. Nothing would have pleased her better than to head out into Donegal on her field trips. She was even doing that in 1940, during World War II. She was a natural teacher. I mean, she taught as a livelihood, as a living. But when you were in her company, you just felt that, you were going to learn something.
She was a very modest lady, she really was. Of course, her main passion or her main interest was archaeology. But for all that, she had so many other passions. Photography was one.
Reports of a new discovery would often go to Mabel first, and in those days Mabel used to contact me, and maybe the two of us would go off together. By the stage I got to know her, she wasn't quite still on the bicycle, but she was still a very able woman. She was involved in all the societies, in the Northwest, including the Londonderry Naturalists Field Club. And on one occasion I was asked to guide the Londonderry Naturalists Field Club on a tour of North Mayo. And it's a very, very extensive souterrain complex. Souterrains are, of course, notorious. They're muddy, they're dirty, they're damp, and I didn't want to go down it. So I thought I'll stand on top of the ringfort and explain it all to the group. And I turned around and I noticed Mabel was missing. And she was in her 80s then. But she wasn't going to stand listening to me talking about it when she could get it down and investigate it herself.
The family originally came from Scotland, the name being Colhoun, a good Scottish name, and they settled in Malin. Mabel's great-grandfather came from Malin and started the business in Derry. So there were 4 generations for a while in Derry, Mabel being the 3rd, I was the 4th. I do know that they became cabinet makers and then builders, because they had Robert Colhoun Limited as the main business in Derry, and in fact built the house in Deanfield, which was the family home. It was very sad, though, that they decided that it needed to be knocked down. And Mabel always loved the view up and down the river. And in fact, when the house was built, she had a part in it. She designed the window of her own bedroom so that she could look up the river and down the river as well as across the river.
She spent a lot of time helping other people. Anything that Mabel had, you were more than welcome to. She worked a lot with a guy called Robert Lloyd Prager. His magnificent book is called The Way That I Went. He has a whole section on County Donegal, which Mabel accompanied him. The work that she did is unsurpassed. It's still going to be a textbook for a long, long time. The way it's laid out is her initial research, then she would have gone back maybe 10 years later and reported on the state of it, then 10 years after that, so you're brought right up to date.
She went to the National Museum in Dublin, and she, as it were, was trained by the directors, Joseph Raftery and Anthony Lucas, in how to do this thing. And then she comes back to the Northwest, and with the, if you like, the training she had got and the advice she'd got at the National Museum, she then meticulously records everything. And so it wasn't just a kind of a matter of just looking at the thing. She trained herself to do the thing. And I mean, in fact, to say almost professional would be, she was probably even better than professional, although she was an amateur. But she was an amateur in the best sense of that word, as a lover of the subject.
Mabel was a member of the Belfast Naturalist Field Club, and at that time these groups would have been going around Ireland and Northern Ireland looking at all the wonderful archaeological and historical sites. So Mabel would have went with them. These were the first comprehensive scientific digs carried out in Northern Ireland.
She was very good in St Mura's, Fon Mura. He was a monk appointed by Colhoun. And she was really in her element when it came to Carndonagh, to the three crosses there. Very, very elaborate and very detailed, and Mabel knew them like the back of her hand. She always needed a helping hand down from the plinth at Carndonagh, and I was one of the few people she would allow to hold her hand to get down from the plinth.
Her material, of course, has all been preserved. An awful lot of it is now in the museum and in other sources. But also then, marvellously, the bulk of her material was published in her great book about Inishowen. Unfortunately, Mabel didn't live to see that. She died about 3 years before the book was published.
I came in contact with Mabel through the book, but then when I seen her archive, I realised I'd only scratched the surface. Boxes and boxes of pamphlets from different historical outings that she attended, artefacts, specimens that were passed from her uncle Charles Wesley Gordon, who was also a pioneer in his own right and a historian who have no doubt influenced her, a treasure trove of items. She was not only someone who recorded these sites, but she protected them. She used to go out in her later years then, obviously by car, and she used to navigate it down the worst back roads. Nothing deterred her. But if she ever went into a site and there was any sort of change whatsoever, she came back and she was an absolute foul humour for the rest of the day.
We actually gave her a nickname in the early days called Anna Me, which was really Auntie Mabel. And then when the next generation came along, she got a G in front of that, so it became Ganamy. So that is still what she's really called in the family.
She didn't set out to be eccentric. She didn't come across as, don't you dare look at me like that kind of thing. There was always, as I said, that twinkle in her eye. She was coming back one evening and she was stopped by an army patrol on the quay. But the soldier said to her, "You realise, madam, you don't have a rear red taillight?" And Mabel looked at him as only Mabel could and said, "Do I look like the sort of lady to be associated with a red light?" Obviously she lived to be a great age, but even, towards the latter end of her life, she must have been in her, certainly her late 70s, possibly her early 80s. She was still playing badminton and playing tennis. She was remarkably fit for her age, and I think that's probably the stuff that kept her going. She was always up and about and working.
She was a lovely woman, tiny little woman. There's a marvellous photograph of her at Muff. There's a famous standing stone, a very tall, single standing stone archaeological monument. And there's a famous photograph of Mabel standing. There's the stone, and here's Mabel. She's very tiny, and she looks like a little elf or something standing beside this ancient monument. But she was really a remarkable person in terms of her method and her devotion and her, her punctiliousness in terms of detail.
I think it's important to remember Mabel because there were so many different facets to her personality, because she has such a wide span of interest. She was very much, yes, a collector, but she also was a pioneer in archaeology. She forged the way ahead, in those early days when archaeology probably wasn't really fashionable. So for me, the collection represents very much the personality of Mabel.
She devoted her life to helping others. She wanted to capture the importance of our past and the present, to keep that for future generations. For that reason alone, it's extremely important that we're now talking about Mabel today.
And I think it is really fitting that the city which she loved, Derry, and her passion and interest in particularly in the study of the outdoors, of archaeology, of wildlife, I think it's really important, and it's terrific that they're being celebrated in an exhibition like this.